Democrats won the House last night for the first time in 8 years, and the new majority will take effect in January, which means that a large number of committees like Judiciary, Intelligence, Ways and Means, all of which have the power to subpoena Trump's tax returns, will be chaired by Democrats in 2019. The question now becomes, do the Democrats have a unified strategy for what to do with all that power? Joining me now, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, Democrat from California, who's slated to become the chair of the House Financial Services Committee. I guess the first question to you is, you have been a very vocal critic of Jeff Sessions, extremely vocal critic, has said he should resign. You don't like what he's done at the Justice Department. Your reaction to his firing today?
Well, you know, this action by the President of the United States to fire him is directly connected to the investigation that is being led by Mueller. This president is interested in undermining that investigation, stopping that investigation. He has threatened to fire him. Of course, many of us have been opposed to Jeff Sessions for a lot of reasons, his racist background, et cetera, et cetera. But this president is focused on him and fired him literally because I think he's putting into action the plan by which to stop the investigation by putting Whitaker in as the acting attorney general. So we're talking about a different situation here, but this is very dangerous. Nancy Pelosi spoke about it today. For those of us who were willing to see what could be done to work with this president now that we have the majority in the House. This is very disappointing for all of the people out there in America who say to us, well, try and work with him. We want, you know, both sides to get together. Here he starts off one day after the midterm election showing us what he thinks about working with us when it's apparent that what he's putting into action is a plan by which to get rid of Mueller. How do you work with someone like this?
Well, I want to play you also something he said today, specifically on this question about oversight and whether oversight would be related to any kind of bipartisan work between the House Democrats and himself. Take a listen.
Are you offering an my way or highway scenario to the Democrats? You're saying that if they start investigating you, that you can play that game and investigate
better than them.
Can you compartmentalize that?
And I think I know more than they know.
Can you compartmentalize that and still continue to work with them for the benefit of the rest of the country?
No.
Or are all bets off?
No. If they do that, then it's just all it is a warlike posture.
What phrase mean to you as someone who's about to be a chair and member of House leadership? What does warlike posture mean to you, Congresswoman?
Well, let me just say this. I have always maintained that Donald Trump would never be presidential. I am not really shocked or surprised by anything that he may say or do. He has been absolutely outrageous in the way that he has called names, outrageous in the way that he has threatened, outrageous in the way that he's promoting himself all the time. He wants to act like a dictator. And so here we are. We find ourselves at a point in time where there are a lot of people who really believed that we could work together. So now he's talking about investigating those who would in any way be involved in an investigation that is ongoing, that has been underway with a special counsel who has been given the mandate to get it done. So I think what we're seeing is a continuation of a president who lacks the authority, the ability, the wherewithal to have an appreciation for the Constitution, for the way that the protocol dictates that we work, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, then let me ask you this.
Yes.
You're part of House leadership. Has there been meetings among House leadership, among the committee chairs today about what to do now? I mean, what is the strategy? Is there a unified strategy? Do you have meetings today? Do you have phone calls today?
There will be ongoing meetings about this issue. We cannot help but develop a strategy. I have nothing I can share with you at this moment about that strategy, given the unveiling of the firing of Jeff Sessions. But I guarantee you we really do have to get together and determine to have a unified approach to dealing with this issue.
All right, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, thank you so much for joining us.
You're so welcome.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.